Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton.
That's a great thing about me. I'm always on.
Wait, that's not Southern discomfort.
April Fools. Hey, everybody. It's April.
And Christine.
And we have a special treat for you tonight. We're participating in Operation Switcheroo. That was an episode of Genuine Chit-Chat by Mike Burton. And he's playing an episode of ours right now. He has a different guest on each episode. And on this one, he speaks with Janine Mercer. She's the host of ODDentity podcast, creator of Corvus Review, and the founder of PodMoth Media, and a friend of the show. So this episode was recorded back in September 2020, and Mike and Janine's conversation starts with a small amount of COVID lockdown talk before they discuss Janine's hearing issues and the weirdness of 2020. And then they get into some talk about fun of collecting. And then the chat changes gears into discussion, where y'all are going to love this, where they talk about cryptids, vampires, legends, werewolves, aliens, before talking about where Janine's intrigue into the weird and wonderful came from. Plus, they discuss hung Jesus, religion and legends, monsters, and the conversation ends with a small discussion on politics. So this is a great podcast episode. You're going to love it. I certainly do. And Janine can be found, she has a website, ODDentity, and it's odd, ODDentity. So it's the ODDentitypodcast.wordpress.com. Corvus Review is core, the letter V as in Victor, .inc. PodMoth Media is podmoth.network. You can follow Mike on Instagram at genuine_chit-chat and on Twitter at genuine chit-chat and on Facebook at genuine chit-chat. You can listen to Genuine Chit-Chat on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, Podbean, and the usual podcast apps. Mike also has another show called Star Wars Comics and Canon, and it can be found on Spotify and other podcast apps on the feed of Comics in Motion. Episode topics include Lando Comics, the Journals of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Count Dooku, Darth Vader, Kylo Ren, Darth Maul, and how C-3PO got his red arm, and more. He also has a Patreon with an exclusive new show, Afterthoughts, with 2 episodes that are free to anyone, and Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, and The Witcher Season 1. Plus much, much more. So if you want to support his show and get more content, check it out at patreon.com/genuine chit-chat. All this will be in the show notes. So if you struggle through my Southern accent, sorry about that, but it'll be in written form on the show notes.
Yeah, and we hope you guys enjoy this as much as we did. And remember, we'll be back with our regularly scheduled show. So stay tuned.
Enjoy.
Hello, listeners to the Southern Discomfort podcast. How are you all doing? I know you can't respond, so I'll assume you're all going, "Hi, Mike, we're doing great, thank you." This is just a quick brief message before the whole chat thing gets started with my chat with Janine Mercer, which I'm very excited for you guys to hear. But just for clarity, my name is Mike Burton. My show is Genuine Chit-Chat, and also I have a different guest on each episode of the show. I've had musicians, travelers, filmmakers. I've had a Star Wars author on. I've had someone who is in Star Wars on my show. I've had other podcasters on. I've had all kinds of different people, authors, actors, loads and stuff. So if you like this conversation with Janine, make sure you go check out Janine's podcast, the ODDentity podcast, but also check out my show. It's on all the usual places. Wherever you listen to Southern Discomfort, you should be able to find it. And I'm not saying you like every single conversation that I have, because I have a lot of them, but I would like to think that anyone who goes through my back catalogue will find at least a few things that they enjoy. And if you go on YouTube, where almost no one listens on YouTube, but if you go on YouTube, I've put loads of things into playlists and things by genre. There's ones about religion, ones about science, one's about relationships, lots of different bits and pieces and things. So you can either contact me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat, or you can just look and browse across the wares that I've got and figure out what you want to listen to from there. But really hope you enjoy this. And just for clarity, most of my episodes are normally about an hour long, and normally if they're over an hour, I split them in two. So this is about 2.5 hours long, so it's quite a long one. But normally on my show, I would have split this into two. So I've got other shows and things as well, but I really hope they've been put in the description and stuff. Star Wars Comics and Canon is the other main one. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this, guys. I really hope you appreciate it. So on with the show.
You just
That's
tell
my
me.
problem.
That's
my exact problem. It's like there's no off switch. People wish there was an off switch for me a lot of the time. In fact, people have actively told me that they wish they had an off switch. I know, it's terrible.
That is terrible.
I am here with Janine Mercer. Hello there. I like doing the intro thing, quick, fast, get it out of the way, even though I ramble on the intro far too much. But it's great to have you on again, Janine. And we've already been chatting a bit before. Mike and we both podcasters quite a lot, so the intro bit is always like, okay, stop all organic conversation,
right.
Press the button, say your name, say okay, now I can get back into it. But you doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing good. We talked about this a little bit before, but the COVID-19 thing kind of is a little crazy. I'm in the U.S., I'm in Wisconsin, so they're talking about instituting some sort of a law or like a strict guideline about people having to wear masks even when they're outside and they're within 30 feet of people.
Wow, okay.
So it'll be interesting to see if a lot of the conservatives will actually grab onto that and follow the rules. I myself have been very liberal for a lot of my life. My family is very liberal. Canadians in general, I think, are very liberal. I don't want to speak for all Canadians, but it seems that way. And so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that because, I mean, as of right now, I could go across the street there's actually a butcher kitty corner from me. So if I leave my house and walk across the street, there is a tiny little butcher shop where like all of the clientele is old and none of them are wearing masks. And it's closed quarters. There's no possible way to social distance. They've covered all of the checkouts with plexiglass. But I mean, it's not, you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to slap some duct tape on this and it's going to be great. We're all going to be fine. It's not going to happen. You have to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's over here. Over here, the government guidelines aren't as strict on individuals. There's the only mask. Certain companies can say if you have to come into this area with a mask and things like that. But apart from that, it's just public transport. It's just on buses, things like that. Mm-hmm. You have to wear a mask. I think all taxi drivers and things have to wear a mask. And I think you're strongly recommended to wear a mask when in a taxi, but they've all got some plexiglass between the front and the back now. Right. So yeah, and all the shops and things, especially the supermarkets, because they've got a surplus of like stickers and things, they've got loads of arrows and things, and they've got actual on the tiles how much distancing there is.
Yep.
And I think there was somewhere, I can't remember if it's in England or if it's in America, I think it might have been England, there was social distancing hearts, like spray painted on the grass in like certain parks. So they're like all 2 meters apart and it's like this big grid of hearts and you can sit in there with a few people. So that's quite cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but beyond the COVID-19 thing, I have been one of the, I don't even know how many millions of Americans who have had to go on unemployment insurance because the business that I work for is going into bankruptcy. And they don't know what they're doing to come back after this or if they'll come back after this. So it's just kind of been a little bit of drama. Beyond that, I got new hearing aids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this before, but I'm hard of hearing.
I think you might have briefly. I don't recall the hearing aid, but please tell.
So, I mean, I know that your listeners are not going to be able to see them, but they're Eargo hearing aids.
Oh, that's really cool.
So they're very small, and they literally fit like right into your ear canal, so you can't see them. There's nothing to physically see.
That's incredible. If you don't mind me asking, how long have you been hard of hearing?
Oh gosh. Well, when I was a stupid teenager, I was in a band, And I spent a lot of nights standing in front of amplifiers with no ear protection. So I would say that my hearing probably was damaged then. But I never actually admitted to myself that I was hard of hearing until probably 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And it's one of those things, like a lot of people who deal with different stages of hearing loss say that it's difficult. The most difficult thing is to admit to yourself that you have an issue. So basically I just kind of had to sit down and give myself a pep talk and be like, listen, like you need to do something about this, because I could be in the living room and my wife could be in the kitchen and I can't hear what she's saying to me. Or I mishear everything. And then like 2 days later, she'll be like, did you go to the butcher and get the rolls that I wanted you to get? And I'm like, no, like when did you say that? I have no idea.
I see.
Which makes it very frustrating. It can make you very angry because you feel like you're almost like on the outside of everything. You're not really part of the conversation. You're not really like a whole person because you can't get the whole picture. You're not getting the whole story. Yeah. But yeah, so it was about 2 years ago that I finally was like, okay, I need to do something about this. And then it was 1.5 years after that that I finally did something about it because I'm a terrible procrastinator with a lot of things. But yeah, I found this company called Eargo, EARGO. And the hearing aids are rechargeable. They come in like a little domed charger.
Oh, wow, that's really cool.
So you just, they're USB, so you just plug them in. And, yeah, they fit completely into your ear canal, so nobody knows you're wearing hearing aids unless you tell them. And I think it's a really great thing to be able to be part of the conversation again. But I also think it's really great that there's something that you can do for yourself that also removes that sense of alienation because you're disabled. Like I have a hard time thinking of myself as disabled in any way because who am I to say I'm disabled? Like there's so many other people in the world who are so much worse off than me.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, that was just kind of the way I was raised. Like you don't complain about that because there's so many other people in the world who are suffering right now. Who are you to, complain because this happened to you when there's so many other people,
Yeah, when you think of disabled, you often think of like more detrimental effects. Usually, first thing you think of disabled, you think of wheelchair. You think of someone who is obviously disability is much more than what you can physically see. But the first thing the knee-jerk reaction in a sense is you're not in a wheelchair, you don't have crutches immediately. And it's just, I can understand how even something as subtle as a hearing aid, which some people would notice, but some people obviously would notice and then will treat you differently due to just seeing something in your ear.
Right. Whereas
this is nice, subtle, when you don't even have to worry about having that interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also, a lot of businesses say that they don't discriminate against people that have disabilities. But that just means that, it's illegal to do that. But that just means that they're not going to say it out loud, exactly. And they're going to hire based on the way that they want and they're going to fire based on the way that they want. And it doesn't matter. For example, I'm a lesbian. There are a lot of places in Wisconsin that say, oh, yeah, we hire LGBT, QIA plus people. We're very pro, but at the same time, they don't have anybody from that community on their staff because they haven't hired them or they fired them for other reasons. So yeah, it's just one of those things. It's another hoop that you have to jump through. There are so many hoops in life that you have to jump through.
And in America, it's quite a lot of water. A lot of the waters are a lot muddier as well, because obviously, I know it's different states have different sort of. There's the federal law as well as it's just there's so many layers to it. Whereas in England, at least from my perspective, it's easier. But obviously, you can't systematic oppression in the sense of hiring someone. As I've said before to friends of mine and things, it's like even if you legislate against racism, for example, when you say like anyone who fires someone for being black or doesn't hire anyone for being black, if the interviewer or the person who's going to hire them is racist but doesn't say anything about it, they can just say, oh, they weren't a fit for the company. And that can be true, obviously, because your skin color and your race doesn't determine how good you are going to be an employee for a place of work.
Right.
But people, the law, unfortunately, in that regard, is like that. One of those little caveats, like you can't really ever know, unfortunately, and
Right.
that's one of those things about. That's one of the things where I'm in a privileged position in that sense of I am male, I am straight, I am white, I am British. It's all these things that
Right.
are just make things a little bit easier in the sense that I don't have to worry about I didn't get the job because of this thing about myself necessarily. I understand in that regard from an outsider perspective, because obviously I haven't that privilege that I have,
Right.
unfortunately.
Well, yeah. And, I mean, there's so many invisible lines.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it.
You don't know if you've crossed them until you've actually crossed them. And then you're like, oh, shit. That's why that happened, because I happened to mention to somebody that I was gay, and now all of a sudden I'm fired, and it's because of work performance, but I've never had a performance review, and what, it doesn't make any sense.
What's behind the curtain?
I mean, there's a lot of people struggling with that. There's just, there's so much, racism and ageism and sexism, and, there are so many isms that we just can't. I mean, you almost can't juggle them all. And now, we have, all this stuff going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, and, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and, all those other people who have been, murdered. I will say murdered by the police.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coming from somebody who is from a military police family. I think that behavior is completely unacceptable and wildly unfortunate for people who are supposed to be out there protecting people.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, we're just living in a crazy world right now.
2020 is mental.
I just don't get it. Like, can we please rewind? Do I get a do-over?
It's like if you said this time last year, because everyone was like, 2020 is going to be everyone's year. 2019 was a bit crap because a few celebrities died and this happened, this happened. It's like, and then 2020 comes around and we're like, it's going to be the best year. And then, there's the bushfires and things. It's like, okay, God. And then there's whole, I think it was Iran or Iraq, and I'm very insensitive for not knowing which one, but the general who was connected with terrorism and things, that whole mess that happened, and everyone's like, oh God, it's the end of the world. And then COVID happens, and then the protests, and it's like everything is happening all in this one insane year, and we're only just over halfway.
Yeah.
But that is, it's absolutely insane. But speaking of something crazy, what you've done is your amount of pop vinyls that you bought, and the reason, or that you've got, and the reason I bring it up is because since I think it was when we last spoke, and you showed me some of them. Obviously, we're friends on social media and things. I see some of the pictures and things, and there's a site over here called Zavvi, and it's just like collectibles and t-shirts and special edition DVDs, that sort of jazz.
Yep.
Nerd merchandise is great, and they have pop vinyls all over the place, and it's just the resistance, because I've been bought a couple for Christmas and I've got little collections of them and things, and Megan was like, oh, I've never had one, it'd be cool if I got one. So I've got her like a Freddie Mercury one and a Wicket one from Star Wars, and I've got another Star Wars one. There's another one coming she doesn't know about. There's now got, I think, 15, but I've always been like a collector of stuff. I collected special edition video games for a while, and then vinyls for a while, special edition Blu-ray DVDs called Steelbooks that are in metal cases, and now it's pop vinyls. So I'm going to get loads of them. Too many for the flat, and then we're going to get a house, and then I'll have loads more space for all my pop vinyls. But yours, you've got next level.
Yeah, I think that the last time I checked, I was at almost 600.
That's incredible.
Which is not a lot compared to some other people that I know.
That you know. Wow.
Yeah. There's a group on Facebook called Wisconsin, I think it's Wisconsin Funko Pop Vinyl Collectors or something. And there was a guy on there who had just hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Funko merchandise. Not just Funko Pop vinyls, but like the soda vinyls, the ones that come in the little soda can, the little minis, the mystery minis, just insanity. And he had like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so every time we would go, I think it was like once a week, they'd ask people to post their top 10, which is essentially a list that you have that shows your top 10 highest priced pops. And my highest priced pop is like $1,200. I paid $9 for it.
Amazing.
But it's highly collectible now because they only made like, I think they only made like 500 pieces.
Oh, wow.
So that's the other side of it too. Like, I have a lot of collectibles that don't necessarily have a lot of value. They have personal value. Like, to me, I enjoy them. But for the most part, it's largely just like, this one is worth $12 and this one is worth, $72 and this one, so there's only a couple. The Captain America black and white Funko Pop that I have is from Gemini Collectibles. That one is $1,200. And then I also have one when the first Thor movie came out, they did a whole line of pops. And so I have the Thor from that specific movie release that is like $320 or something. Oh, and then they go from there. Like, I have a 4-pack of Universal Monsters. I think it's like $350 now, valued at $350. But I mean, the other part of it too, you have to consider, if I ever wanted to sell anything, I would have to look at the sold listings on, say, eBay, and be like, okay, well, this one is worth $350, but it's sold for $250. So, how do you price it out, kind of thing? I don't know that I would ever sell anything.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
My wife wishes I would sell things, but I can't.
My girlfriend is very similar. I've got a lot of different collectibles and things like that. Like, there's a game called Fallout New Vegas, and they released a special edition where you get the poker chips, playing cards, an art book, and a few other things. And there's like 9,500 or so made, and it's got the stamp on how, number 3,000 or whatever. Yep. And it's all. I got a copy of. I got that Fallout New Vegas, and then I laser burned it, or whether my Xbox laser burned it, and then so I went to. It was Game Station at the time, and basically got another one back, but they didn't take the broken one off me. So I went home, and I realised that I had still the broken game with the receipt and the fixed one. So I just took it in again, and I had 2 sealed brand new copies, and I just put one back in my collectible edition thing. Right, yeah. So it's completely wrapped, and it looks like it hasn't been touched.
Nice.
And it's like one of my only collectibles where I'm like, even if that if it was worth like £1 million, if there's some sort of crazy millionaire out there who wanted one and he was like, I will give you, I would do that. But like, if it was like, oh, you could sell it for like $2,000, right? That's the kind of amount where it's like, that is, I wouldn't want to lose $2,000, but that's quite pushed. $2,000 quite a lot. But if it was like 500, I'm like, but 500, like, I kind of, would the amount 500 would bring me the joy of the sentimental value of that? Because like, my dad got it for me, who's passed away. And I've got a lot of things that are like that. And it's like, would I really want to sell it? I've got old Game Boy Advance games that I've got like Link to the Past and Metroid and things, like remakes that are worth about 80 quid at the moment, and the bought for 30. And so I don't want to sell them because I think the games are amazing. But if they sold for like $5,000, you know what I mean? But they're never going to the chance, because then I'd be like, oh, if they sold for $5,000, I'd sell them. Then it'd be like one of those movie moments. The next morning they'd be worth 5 million, and that's always in my mind. So I just never sell in case I lose out on the sale.
Yeah. Almost. Well, and I think a lot of my collecting is. I think it has something to do with my childhood, because when I was growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of money. So whenever I got something that was, action figure, I was never into dolls. I was never a doll person. So for my birthday and stuff, I would always ask for action figures. And those action figures were always like Thundercats, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, He-Man, you name it, Ewoks. Like, I just had... anything and everything related to these shows. And I wanted to take all of that stuff out of the package and play with it. And now that I'm an adult, because we didn't have a whole lot of money, and now I have a job, and, I'm a functioning member of society, now I want to take all of this money and just throw it at plastic pieces of shit. I don't know if it makes any sense to anybody but me, but it's just like, now I want to keep everything pristine in the plastic. Like, for example, Mego just released a line of Universal Monsters characters. Oh. And they have a line from like I think it's the 60s, the late 50s, early 60s. And I won't even get into like T1 Megos and like the difference between because I'll lose you. But they, you know, they were dolls and they came with clothes and they were for the, you know, quote unquote little boys to play with. And so they re-released the entire line. So now they have like the Invisible Man, they have the creature from the Black Lagoon, they have the Wolfman, Dracula, Phantom of the Opera. Like, you know, there's just there's a whole line that they've re-released. And so I had to buy one of each and then keep them pristine in the packaging so that, you know, 50 years from now, maybe somebody will open her sarcophagus and be like, look, she was buried with all of this plastic shit. How much is it worth? And then that'll pay for, you know, the hosting me in the cemetery. Yeah.
That's a great plan. I mean, with the pop vinyls and things, or Funko Pops, I've been with them at the moment. Megan's just got one from the Witcher as well. I got it's got a glow in the dark flame spell, which is cool. And I really like the way they are at the moment. We're in a flat, and we're living here for a couple of years. We're just saving up to buy a place, and because we're renting here, and because we're renting, our landlord's pretty lenient with certain stuff. We can put nails in the wall and things, but I don't really want to put full shelves up, and I don't want to, you know, redecorate because that is more hassle than it's worth. And then you put all the effort in, then you move out in 2 years, and then it's just like, so I'm gonna wait until we get a house, but I want to have like a shelf up, and it's like there's this internal struggle with myself, and it's like one of my pop vinyls is a Han Solo exclusive that my mate got me, and it's just got an exclusive sticker on that's nice, and only the Geralt Igni Witcher one has also got one of those on it, and they're special exclusives or whatever. Right. And it's like, I want to get them out and make a little diorama with them because I've got like Star Wars characters, and I'm going to get some Harry Potter ones, and probably a couple of Lord of the Rings and Dragon Ball Z and loads of things because I can't stop. And I have to limit myself to like 1 or 2 a month, but I've got like 6 or 7 that are pre-ordered for August. Because I'm just out of the year. I'll buy those 3, then 2 for 18 quid or whatever, or 3 for 30 quid or something like that. Yeah. But only one of them's out, and the other 2 are pre-orders. And they've all, because of COVID, they've all just got stuck, and they're all coming out in August. So I'm going to get like 7 or 8 of them in the post. God. But I'm like, do I want to take them out? Like, I can, if I take them out the packaging and leave the packaging and preserve it, I could put them back in, but then that won't be mint. And what if they become loads of money one day? But surely I should have fun with, like, I'm almost dreading getting a house because I can just put it off until then.
Right. Well, and I mean, part of it, so about a year ago, I came to the realization that I was collecting for myself. And so I'm not going to super worry about what everything is worth, because I'm not collecting because I want to collect things that will eventually be worth a lot of money. I'm collecting right now because it brings me joy, you know, like whatever makes your heart sing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so what I've done is, I have painstakingly opened some of the packages that I have in order to display the items that I really like so that I can enjoy them. Because I mean, ultimately it's in my office. Like, I'm the only person who goes in there because there's creepy shit in there. My wife doesn't like it. So I, you know, like half the room is collectibles and the other half is creepy shit. So I you know, cut off a piece of the room and I was like, okay, now this part of the room right here, this box is going to be for all my collectibles. So I went out and I bought, IKEA has these Detolf cabinets, which are like glass-sided tower cabinets.
Yeah.
They're like, I think they're about like 5 feet tall or something. And I took 3 of those and put them together. And now I have like different, you know, setups. I have different risers and stuff like that you can buy so that you can see everything. And there are some items that I will not take out of the package.
Okay.
Because, I mean, the Captain America that I have is worth $1,200. Like, I'm not, I can see that through the window on the box. Like, I don't need to open that box. But just a little tip, if you ever want to open a box and have it remain mint, then what you do is you get a spatula that's about the same size as the slot on the bottom of the box. You stick the spatula in and you stick your finger in a little bit and you pull out on the bottom flap.
Okay.
Take the figure out from the bottom, close the box back up.
That's genius. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
That's amazing. I mean, yeah, it's collectibles are weird things. When I think about collectibles, I think of crows, which are a cool, incredible being. And obviously they collect things like shiny things. And there's been stories of people when they make friends with crows and the crows they feed the crows and the crows bring them random piece of jewelry they found or little shiny things. And I just think, it sounds so almost lame saying it out loud, but almost the weird little part or the tiny amount of DNA that I share with a crow. That's what that is. Just this. I just love not shiny things necessarily. I generally with Funko Pops, I don't like the metallic, the like purely chrome metallic ones as much. I like ones where you can see the in air quotes detail and the colors. And it's like, I've always been into collectibles since I was younger. I've always even just little cheapy things, you go around the corner shop and there's little Mario things and you always get the one you don't want, but they're fun, and I just collecting them and just even now ordering them on, Savvy or whatever, and you just, it's coming, and it's like, oh, the knock at the door, the delivery's come, and you open it up, and it's just, it's what you say, the joy. It's a very, it's almost, it's just inexplainable. If someone said, what do you love so much about it? It's like, well, I like getting it, and I like opening it, and I like putting it on the side, and then looking at it all the time because it makes me happy. And it's like, that's why, I just like, it makes, I don't know, when I'm not looking at it, I'm less sad than when I'm looking at it. That's why I've got so many.
Well, and I mean, I also, I was a communication major in college for my bachelor's degree, and I did a presentation once on artifacts.
Okay, yeah.
And placement, because it communicates a lot about us and who we are and how we function. And so when you look at my office, my desk faces away from all of the collectibles. Except for the ones that I'm keen on, which are like on the back of my desk or like slightly off to the left. Yeah, apparently it's really easy to tell whether or not your coworkers like their family, judging on where they put their pictures in their cube.
Oh, really?
It's like, do you want to deal with your mother-in-law? No? Oh, you probably put her behind your head then so that you don't have to look at her all day.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things to change gears slightly, or I end up talking about collectibles the entire time, was one thing I really was excited about when we were talking sort of before the show and in messaging and things, which was cryptids, which when you said that to me, I had to look up the word. Yes. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, I know what that is. So if you want to explain to people what that is, because it's like that people listening are probably like, I don't know what that is. When you explain it, they'll know.
Well, I mean, I don't really want to get into like the definition of the word cryptid and like
becomes too
whatever. But I mean, my favorite cryptids are the Mothman, the Jersey Devil. Let's see, werewolves. Anything related to werewolves, because werewolves are actually pretty big in Wisconsin. People have been seeing werewolves in Wisconsin for a very long time.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a big one for me. Also Spring Hill Jack, which was a 19th century boogeyman. He was in England.
Okay.
So closer to you than he is to me. But yeah, I mean, they're essentially creatures that defy explanation. And if you've read a story about them, logic would tell you that it's not necessarily something that you should believe wholeheartedly. It's something that you should take with a grain of salt and then do your own research.
Yeah.
When I said Mothman, a lot of people probably flashed to that movie, The Mothman Prophecies. If you ever watch that movie, it talks about Point Pleasant and the Silver Bridge collapse. And I think that was like around 1966, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, the bridge collapsed, and apparently for a few days before, people were seeing this, for lack of a better word, giant bird-like creature that had like glowing red eyes. Okay. And they said that every time something bad happened, they saw this creature. And so they started to attach it to death and destruction and, whatever. And then in terms of the Jersey Devil, we have some similarities there. The Mothman, the giant bird, the glowing red eyes. The Jersey Devil was a similar kind of thing. It apparently lives in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey. It was the 13th child of Mrs. Leeds, who some say was a witch, and had sex with the devil, and then had this offspring who is a mix between a kangaroo, a goat, and a bird.
Okay, the goat I can kind of get with things to do with the devil, but
yeah. Well, apparently it also has a forked tail, so it just screams devil, right?
Yes.
So yeah, apparently that because it was the 13th child and it was born on a very stormy night and whatever, it came into the world apparently very violently and attacked some family members and flew up the chimney and went to live in the Pine Barrens. And that story apparently is from like the 1730s.
Oh, wow.
So that story has been around for a very long time and people are still seeing it. Just like people are still seeing the Mothman. They're still seeing, Sasquatch, the Yeti. They're still seeing all of these strange creatures. And logic would tell you that it's just not realistic to think that these things exist. But in the back of your mind, you're like, but what if? That's just, I mean, that's the reason why I enjoy cryptids and cryptozoology, and I find it fascinating. I don't really understand these shows that get out like in the woods and try to find Bigfoot and stuff. Like I don't really get that. Like he's onto you, dudes. He's not gonna come out. And plus they're too freaking loud. Like the cameras everywhere. Like he's not. I mean, yeah, Bigfoot got better things to do.
Well, it's like if he did exist, it's like the actual, if he was a being that existed, it's one of those things where it's like, there's a lot of paranormal things which I necessarily believe, but there is that part of the back of my mind where I'm like, part of me does kind of think it is. So it's like almost, I feel like almost a lot of people with religion in some ways are almost like, no, there's no God or anything. But is there a heaven though? It's almost in that kind of way, in the sort of, you can't fully shake it in some ways. I'm not a religious individual, to clarify, but it is just that, as you say, is you kind of want it to be. You want that mystery. It's almost what I like about things like Star Wars, and this is like that's what I love about media, right? Reading fictional stories and getting into the thing I love about Star Wars. It's escapism in some ways, but the be able to move things with your mind and having crazy laser swords, or being a space wizard, like that's amazing to imagine. And right. Cryptid is like in a more grounded way. It's like, what if there's cool? What if there were werewolves? What if vampires are a very fun one? Like the amount of history to do. Obviously, I think it's like Vlad the Impaler, and then I think was Nosferatu a person or a legend? I know there's the film, which was super old. Yeah,
Nosferatu. So I don't remember. I did a piece about this for the podcast way back. But the movie Nosferatu is actually a ripoff of Dracula. Okay. So, like, the woman who owns the rights for Dracula got pissy with the people who made Nosferatu and demanded they destroy every copy.
Oh, okay.
And some copies slipped through. So, yeah, I mean, Nosferatu is essentially a loose retelling of the Dracula legend, from what I understand. But Dracula is actually, vampires in general are very interesting because vampires are not, they're not cryptids. They're legends.
Right.
And the legend is very, very old. It's associated with death, but it's associated with the understanding of death, which way back when was very limited. People didn't understand the process of putrefaction. They didn't understand how bodies break down after burial. They didn't understand how gases built up within the corpse. They just didn't understand all of the science behind it. And so because they thought that their family members were coming alive at night and going around and sucking people's blood, they would then, go to the graveside and drive a stake through their heart. Or they would put a stone in their mouth. So you have some bodies being found with actual like rocks jammed into their mouths.
Wow.
And I mean, it looks very violent, but people did that because they just didn't understand why, if you opened a grave, it's the dead of winter and you've opened this grave and you're looking at your deceased loved one and they have blood at the corners of their mouth and they look like they could be alive. And, your uncle is really sick and he's saying that so-and-so is visiting him at night and whatever. So there was just all this lore surrounding it. And, I mean, it's built on fear. It's just all built on fear and, for lack of a better word, ignorance of exactly what happens to bodies after they're buried.
And I think there's that religious tone to it as well, because obviously there's the whole, for a long time, and in a lot of vampire things, it is the cross. And it's one of my favourite films is From Dusk Till Dawn. It's ridiculous, over the top.
Oh, God. George Clooney was such a baby face in that movie.
Yeah. It was so good. I loved it. It was one of my first tastes of just of ridiculous, over the top, grindhouse, that sort of thing. And it's, he's got the shotgun with a bat, and it's like he shoots with the shotgun, and then he lifts it up, and it's a crucifix, and all the vampires go, and it's so cheesy, and I love it. And he dips it in holy water, all that stuff. It's amazing. And it's like the crossing. I remember watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That was when I was like 10. I watched all of them with a childminder that's just basically a babysitter, but straight after school. And
what did you say? Your childminder?
Childminder. Yeah, it's a babysitter is when the parents often go out at night. You have someone there who's a babysitter to make sure the kids go to bed. A childminder is more so after school. If your parents are working, you go there, and then your parents pick them up. It's almost like the opposite in some ways.
Oh, so it's a daycare.
Kind of, yeah, but it's the childminder's not like it is daycare. It is correctly daycare, but here it's like a daycare is an official business, which has several people there. Right. There's loads of kids there, whereas a childminder could have 1 to 4 or 5. And it was just my childminder. She had 2 daughters. One was my age, and one was 5 years older. And for some reason, especially when I was younger, I had an affinity with getting on with older women a lot more. Not in any weird way. It was just I was very talkative, and I was very interested in a lot of stuff. And so when this girl Gemma, she was 5 years older than me. She liked watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and she wanted to watch it. I caught it at one point, and then my mum found out and said, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, awesome. So I was watching like Buffy the Vampire Slayer like when I was at 10, 11, 12. It was amazing. I think Willow was my first crush, actually, from that show.
Really?
Yeah, Alison Hannigan. Great. Yeah. I mean, I don't like her as much in American Pie. But then obviously Buffy, she's a witch, and she goes that season where she goes absolutely mental. And it's like,
yeah, right.
I love that sort of thing. And so vampires, especially with my generation, it's since they've been around for a very long time. Mm-hmm. But there was the peak. Obviously, I'm not into Twilight. I've seen almost all of them now with my niece. God. But I know they offend me with the shiny light. And it's like the one thing about vampires is sunlight. Come on. But I love Blade and all that stuff. So vampires are like, I know they're not cryptids, but they're one of my favourite legends. They're like that thing where it's like, it would be so cool if they existed, but it really wouldn't be. But it would be.
Right. Well, and the really interesting thing about werewolves, too, is they kind of toe the line between legend and cryptid.
I think those two are the most common things put together. I mean, zombies kind of in the older vampire stuff, but werewolves and vampires always, when you have a double, if it's vampires by itself, whatever, but as soon as there's one other supernatural thing, it's almost always werewolves.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and then also, before we move on from Mr. Dracula and vampires, you know how some of those graves that you see, the really old ones, have like cages over them? Oh,
yes.
So a lot of people seem to think that that's to prevent the vampire from rising.
Right.
It's actually like a safe that's placed on the grave to prevent grave robbing. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, I recently did a piece about Burke and Hare.
Oh, I've heard of them because there's that movie out I haven't seen. It's about
yeah, and it talks a lot about how they would go into graveyards and they would, rob human remains, and they would sell the remains to medical schools and what have you. And I mean, some people paid just ridiculous amounts of money to protect their loved ones' remains to keep them from getting stolen. And other people just couldn't afford that, so they just basically sat around the graveyard every night.
Wow.
Until the body decomposed enough, and then it wasn't usable. So yeah, anyway, those cages, grave robbing.
That's amazing. Vampires. But to do with werewolves and things, do you know why they're intertwined with vampires so much? And the sort of, I'm interested if I assume you know the sort of, is it lichen? It's to do with lycanthropy, that sort of thing with werewolves?
What is it?
Is that what it's called? Is it lichen? What's the thing?
Oh, lichens.
Is that anything to do with werewolves?
Yeah. I kind of feel like a lot of the vampire werewolf lore was intertwined through pop culture.
That's how I know about it.
I think that's because, I mean, from what I've done, and I am by no means an expert. I've just done a lot of research on different topics. But from what I understand, those two legends are not connected.
Okay.
I think a lot of people watched, what was that movie with Kate Beckinsale and Scott Speedman? Underworld. Yeah. I think that when that movie came out, people started getting really super into werewolves and vampires, and like it was cool and, you know, whatever. There's also, I'm sure, like the Universal movie line. I'm pretty sure they have one that's like Dracula versus the werewolf, or like Frankenstein versus the werewolf. I mean, they were constantly trying to put people together so that they could sell more seats, you know? And it's like, you know, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, you know, or like the Three Stooges battle a werewolf. Like it was literally like just to put asses in seats. They were like, yeah, you know, we're going to put all these people together. But yeah, I think primarily it was just pop culture and, you know, what two things can we put together that are going to be really interesting? Well, if we do a movie about Van Helsing, you know, you know, we'll throw vampires and werewolves in there and that'll be really cool. You know, whatever. Yeah, I recently finished watching What We Do in the Shadows.
Is that the series or the movie?
The series.
I haven't seen the series yet.
So the series is awesome.
Oh, okay. I need to watch it then.
It's hilarious. The guy who plays Mr. Renham on the IT Crowd.
Oh, is it the boss you speak of?
Yes.
Is that Matt Berry?
Yes, Matt Berry.
It is Matt
Berry, cool. So he's in it.
I love him.
And he's just hilarious. And like all the stupid like sexual innuendos and like whatever. It's essentially like Mr. Renham as a vampire.
That is the best.
But yeah, it was literally like watching an episode of The Office, but with vampires. It was fantastic. You know, all the live, you know, the quote unquote live like interview tactic kind of TV.
I love those sort of shows.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I just finished watching that and I am just completely smitten with it. I think it's fantastic. I haven't seen the movie yet. I have to watch the movie next. But
so I've already seen the movie because I like the director Taika Waititi because he did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's done What We Do in the Shadows. He did a film called Boy that I haven't seen. Thor Ragnarok, Hunt for the Wilder People. I love that, and Jojo Rabbit.
Oh yeah, I seem to recall something about Thor. People were worried that he was going to direct Thor, and they were concerned that it was going to be like weird or strange or something. I don't know. I feel like I read an article about that recently, but
I think they were worried, and then he did it, and it's one of the most popular of all the. It's literally it's probably my favorite of all the Marvel films, bar probably Endgame. But he's also going to be doing a Star Wars film as well with someone else. So it's like, let him just. At the moment, I'm like, just let him do what he wants, do loads of weird, crazy things, and if they suck, we won't talk about them.
Just throw money at him.
Yeah, let the crazy guy just be. He's so awkward. He's like, someone I know described him as like, he's such dramatic things happen, but everyone reacts in such undramatic ways. Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's just like this constant like casualness to everything, and I love it. It's the New Zealand. It's like Flight of the Conchords. Have you seen Flight of the Conchords?
Oh, I think oh my god, like a half dozen years ago. But yeah,
it's quite old, but that's sort of they're New Zealand, and obviously they're more musical, but it's that sort of humour. I do love that, but. Yeah, vampires are such a. Oh, no, I was going to ask werewolves. Actually, you said about there's a lot of werewolf sightings in a sense around Wisconsin, around where you are. Did you say?
Yeah. So the Holy Hill area. Holy Hill is like they have a really nice church there, and there's some really nice grounds and stuff. But apparently, it is like a breeding ground for werewolves or something. Like people have experienced werewolves running alongside their car. Late at night, they've experienced strange howling noises that they can't explain. It doesn't sound like a normal wolf. It sounds like something larger. Let's see. There's the Beast of Bray Road, which is another werewolf legend. There's literally a road in Wisconsin called Bray Road, and apparently the Bray Road Beast is like a werewolf human hybrid something or other. That supposedly has torn people apart and, you know, whatever. I mean, there's just, there's so much, I don't know, hearsay, I guess, in those kinds of stories. A lot of them, I think, were designed as cautionary tales. I think we kind of talked about urban legends last time, and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and how they're designed essentially to be cautionary tales. You know, don't go down there late at night because something bad will happen. Don't go here because something bad will happen. And the something bad will happen is literally insert anything that your mom or dad or grandparents can conjure up on a whim, and insert into this threat, don't go here or something bad will happen. So yeah, I think that a lot of the stories were designed in some ways to do that. There are also adults who are reporting that they're seeing it. So I don't really know. I mean, there's a documentary on Amazon right now, I think called The Beast of Bray Road.
Okay.
So if you have Amazon Prime, it's, free to view. I don't know how much it is if you don't have Amazon Prime, but probably a couple of bucks,
Normally, yeah.
But it's a really good movie. Towards the end, they talk to a lady who has written an extensive book about the Beast of Bray Road and compiled all of the experiences that she's gotten from, people who live in that particular area, in the Holy Hill area. Yeah, so it's a pretty interesting legend. And some of those recordings that people are sharing, they're pretty spooky. Like, it doesn't sound like a wolf. It sounds like somebody, like, howling or screaming like a wolf. But it's, dead of night and there's a slight fog and it's kind of delightful.
Some of those weird, crazy things. I remember when I was younger, I think it was around right at the end of school. So I was 15 or so. And I remember going to the library and taking out loads of books about the paranormal and ghosts and aliens. They were the two things that grabbed me hugely. And I think that's because my brother, I've got a couple of older brothers, but one of them, called Rob, he's been on the podcast actually. He and I used to watch loads of films. He got me into Terminator and Aliens and Predator, and he'd always say, Mum would say, when I was 12 plus, Mum said you can watch anything as long as there's no hard drugs or sex in it. So that was Predator and Aliens and Terminator and as much blood and gore and ridiculousness as possible, as long as my brother said it was okay. I remember once they said I couldn't watch, I think it was My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, I think it was, which is like an Uma Thurman movie that I still haven't seen to this day, funnily enough. But because there were a certain amount of sex references in, and I think it was like, I don't know, 11 or something, and it was out on DVD or whatever, and they said I couldn't watch that, but I could watch Predator 2. I was like, okay, I think there's a scene where someone gets skinned in that, but that's cool.
You're right. I was going to
say. So I got into Aliens, and I think it was around the time where YouTube first was kind of being a thing. I remember going on computers and things, and I just for hours would look up alien and ghost things. Oh, sure. And, whether or not any of them could be real is another story, but some of them were so convincing. Like, I remember watching one of them now, like a year or two ago. I looked one of them up, and I remember it being quite freaking. You watch it now, and you're like, God, no, this is so. How could I even conceive this is real?
This is clearly fake. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a big noise or something, and someone runs to the room, and then you hear a loud bang, and he turns, and you see an alien face, and it turns and runs, but it's literally like. Have you seen Alien Autopsy, the film?
Yeah. I saw that when it premiered on TV.
Yeah, with Ant and Dec in it.
Yeah.
They're the two guys.
You always make me sound just like so old whenever it's back. It's like, we went to the drive-in and it was such I went to the drive-in to like the first movie I ever seen, whatever. Anyway.
But yeah, the Alien Autopsy, like the thing they've got in basically that film on the table, it was basically one of those things out their YouTube camera. It was really low res with the night vision stuff, and it ran. And I remember being so freaked out when I was younger, and then I watched that now, and I'm like, damn it! But you can only go down a rabbit hole, and you so want to watch one where it's like infallible, but now because of computer technology and everything, the chances of an actual alien sighting being caught and put on YouTube and not being some ridiculous amount of world news is very unlikely. Yeah. But that's where my sort of love for it. I read books and stuff like ghosts and things like that. I'm not sure if I asked you last time we spoke. Is there? I know that you've mentioned about potential paranormal experiences and things, but have you? Is your family? Do they believe in that sort of thing? Is that where it started, or what was the kind of?
Oh no.
Oh, it's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah. My dad is very much. He's very straight-laced when it comes to what's going on in the world. Things are a certain way, and there's no gray area.
I see.
My grandparents are the same way. I was raised essentially to look at everything through a lens of this is probably not real. Mm-hmm. And then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, I remember going to the Creepy Kid in high school and getting a loan of the VHS tapes of Faces of Death.
What was Face of Death? Can I recall?
And like it was like these creepy videotapes that showed like autopsies and stuff and like severe accidents or whatever. And it was like this big thing. And I remember like me and a bunch of my friends went down into the basement and we were watching it as low as we possibly could, like all lying on the floor right in front of the TV, watching Faces of Death. And I remember I wasn't like super disturbed by it, but a lot of people were. And I was like, why? Like, why are you super disturbed by this? This is not like some of it you could absolutely look at it and be like, yeah, that's fake. Like, that's not like, that's clearly ketchup and Jell-O and whatever. And like, they went to the butcher and they got innards or sausages or something. And that's what this is. But then there's that other side of it that you're like, but that kind of looks a little real, maybe. I'm not really sure. And that's kind of the way that my brain has always operated. Like, I've always been, well, that kind of, I mean, that's a little weird. Like, what is that? And then I have to go in and like dig and try to figure out. But yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my upbringing was a little strict. I think I told you the last time that my parents got divorced when I was like 13. Mm-hmm. And at that time I went to live with my grandparents for some time. And my grandmother was of the opinion that little girls, young ladies, are not out past like 8 p.m. at night and they don't do certain things and they don't wear certain things and they act a certain way. And so she was Roman Catholic and my grandfather was Salvation Army. My father was Salvation Army. A lot of people think that Salvation Army is just a thrift store. It's not. It's an actual religion. And it's very strict. Like, God punishes and like God's gonna get you. Like, like bad. It's bad. But yeah, so I mean, I was raised that way, and I was never allowed to do or say a lot of the things that, you know, I do and say now, which is why I'm so kind of out there and crazy shit.
Interesting.
But yeah, I got to a point in my life, I think when I was like in my teens, like my late teens, I decided that I was just going to do what I wanted to do to like figure out what was happening in the world around me. Because so many people in my life had told me, well, that's not real. Well, that's not true. And it's like, but who are you? What do you know? You know, like, so I've always been kind of a cynic. But also that person who has that little like Jiminy Cricket voice in the back of their head, like, but what if, you know? And I think that's largely the way that I operate, is on the what if. I mean, in terms of aliens, I don't really have a firm stance on aliens. I'm not really sure I believe or disbelieve. I do know that the universe is very, very big, and there could very well be something somewhere. I think
there's more galaxies in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth or something.
Yeah,
mental.
Like, it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
And in terms of the paranormal, I mean, I've personally had paranormal experiences. I've had them since I was very young. So, I mean, when I talk about that stuff, I can personally say with an absolute certainty that those things happened to me. Mm-hmm. But then somebody else has that voice in the back of their head that's like, but wait, like, you know, what is what you're telling me true? Or, you know, is it something that you made up or whatever? So yeah, I mean, I think that we all have a little bit of cynic in us.
Yeah, it's one of those with, I've said it with ghosts before, there's a lot of people whose opinions I trust completely, you know, and things, you know, everyone's got, not in air quotes, the weird friend, but you've got people who believe in things that are very different to you and quite out there. And I'm normally the friend who loves chatting with these people, especially I go to festivals and things and get intoxicated. And I love sitting around a campfire late at night and chatting with someone. And we just, like, a lot of the time it's ridiculousness about the universe, but it's so fun to talk about. Like, for example, I'm not mocking if anyone believes this, but for example, the aliens back thousands of years ago, you know, 200,000 years ago, whatever, came down, either mated with us or helped us with technology or some sort of thing. And then that is one of the reasons why the human brain size doubled in size in such a short period of time. I don't believe that happened. If you said to you, I think that is what happened in human history, I would say I don't. But I love talking to people who believe that because it's such a fun thing to talk about. And I go, there's no harm if someone's believing that and they're putting detriment to their family and they're thinking aliens are going to come back and they start ruining their lives and things like literal tinfoil hats. I'd say, okay, take it down a notch. But if you're just someone who likes to get a bit mullered and likes to chat about what if aliens? Oh, that would explain this, wouldn't it? Oh, yeah, but it would explain that too. And it's fun. And I feel like that with the paranormal, and I feel like that with even, to some degree, religion in a different way, depending on who it is, because obviously religion can be quite a powerful and also unfortunately toxic in certain ways.
Sure.
Obviously. But I'm not saying people who are religious are bad in any way, shape or form, but it's that sort of thing where even though I don't believe in any religion and I don't necessarily believe that ghosts do, I'm not like ghosts do not exist and I'm 100%. It is that I don't think they exist, but I love hearing paranormal experiences. I love going into places that people are haunted and you do feel something. Like one of my favourite things is castles. And in Britain, I'm so thankful for living in Britain because we've got such history and so many people invaded us over the years that we've got so many different things that are so cool. And I love going into old castles, and me and my girlfriend, we were planning on going this, my girlfriend, Megan, she has a name. We go on this trip. It was going to be around Europe and things in August, but we'll postpone that till next year now. So we're just going to go around England and we're going to castles and museums and just loads of cool. I think we're going to go to like a cider orchard at some point as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I love cider, but I just love castles and museums. And when you walk somewhere, you just feel how fucking old it is. It's so cool. That's one of the things that I love about ghosts is that you always get them in some of the coolest places. And there's always a great story to go around why this is haunted. The woman in the white dress who saved all these army soldiers, but then saved a bad soldier and then, or not bad, the enemy soldier, but then the good soldiers on our side killed her for betraying. And there's all this cool history. And it doesn't matter if there's a ghost because the story and the environment is cool enough. And that's what I really like about your show and also talking with you, because it's just, it doesn't matter. I don't like when people are like, you can't talk about aliens because they don't exist. It's like, well, my opinion on aliens, now I'll ask a question to you because I'm just rambling, is just that aliens, I believe they exist in the universe somewhere, as in a life that maybe one could argue is sentient in some ways like us, or maybe dogs and cats, that sort of thing, that level of being. I believe there's got to be a planet that has some degree of life on it. But do I think they've necessarily come here and visited us and we've got evidence of them? Statistically, I think it's unlikely. But it's fun to talk about.
I mean, I think that if they have, they wouldn't be telling us.
No, they would be so subtle.
They wouldn't be leaving calling cards.
No.
We were here. Sorry, we missed you. Like, no, there wouldn't be any shit like that. It would just be like, yeah, okay, so we went there on this, such and such a star date, da-da-da-da-da. And they were doing this and we found it really fascinating. And so we're going to log it. And then, in 25 years time, we're going to go back again, But yeah, I always find the concept of like alternate realities really fascinating.
Yes.
And I almost feel like we're living alongside different realities. So like we're here right now, but to the right of me and behind me, perhaps there's something else going on in a different world, in a different time, in a different place. And it's kind of the way that I look at death as well. And it's a little hokey because I have kind of sort of started thinking this ever since I saw the movie Mirrors with Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, I think I remember you saying about this before. Yeah. Please tell me again. I love this. Say it again. It's amazing. So it's a movie about this guy who gets a job as a security guard at, I think it's a store, some sort of like old retail space. And there's something about the mirrors. So there's like some sort of, it's been a while since I've seen it, but there's some sort of, I don't know if it's alien or like paranormal, something going on behind all of these mirrors. And so there's this room in the basement that he goes into and he can see this completely other world. And at the end, there's like a really weird, like, I don't want to give it away, but there's like a twist ending where he's looking into the mirror and the mirror is looking back at him. And like, it's just, yeah, it's very strange, but it's something that I think I can get behind just because
I'm not particularly religious, because I feel like religion equals creepy. Too creepy for me, even. It's really funny. I had a conversation with my grandmother. My grandmother was like, I don't understand why you enjoy all this creepy stuff. Like, it really worries me that, like, you collect bones and, like weird stuff. And I said, Nan, you're Roman Catholic. Like, really? We're going to have this conversation? You're in a glass house right now. Like, no. I mean, they collect, like, saints' bones, and, like, you go to the Vatican, and they have, like, the past popes and, like, little, and they're, like, green, like, weird little green men, and those red, they look like the Grinch.
Yeah.
Like, they're, in these cases, and you can go and look at them. I'm like, that's the weirdest shit ever, and you're going to tell me that because I have a raccoon skull in my collection, that's too creepy for you? I don't know.
It's funny, the crucifix as well. I was going to say, there's so many churches, because I went to a Catholic primary school.
Oh,
Neither
right.
of my parents are religious, but I went to a Catholic primary school. And so when we went to mass and church and things, there's a big Jesus crucified with the things in his hand, the bolts and things in his hands and his feet, with the thorn crown bleeding.
Yeah.
And when we're having these nice songs about God is love and all that sort of stuff, which is fine, whatever. And you're looking at this crucified guy up there, and it's like, that's pretty damn weird. Like that bones are cool. Taxidermy stuff is really cool too, but it's like that is a bit of a push for you and me.
At the college that I got my bachelor's degree from, it's a Franciscan institution. So like St. Francis of Assisi, the poor man from Assisi. And in, like, when you go down one of their main hallways, at the top of a bank of stairs, like staring you right in the face, is the San Damiano cross. And I don't know if you're familiar with the San Damiano cross, but smaller versions are okay. They're okay. It's okay. When you blow it up to like 17 feet tall,
ooh,
his abs look like an erect penis. So it's literally like a man being crucified and really enjoying it in the middle of this Catholic university. And I'm like, can we go somewhere else and study for this math final? Because I can't stand Jesus's erection right now. I just can't do it today. It's too much. But yeah, they have one in every single classroom, and it's literally like 18 inches high. And it's fine. You can't, like, there's nothing the matter with that. But when he's so big, it doesn't work. And the nuns don't get it. They don't see it. And everybody else who's like, I don't know what the word would be, worldly.
Worldly?
Who has maybe seen one, knows that is, so.
That's the package.
Jesus is the whole package.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's it. That's all you need. Jesus' whole package.
Indeed.
It is a weird one with the paranormal, especially, and obviously we're speaking about vampires that are legends and things, but like even with werewolves, there's religion has often played, and I think I don't know if it's because of the media putting a spin on it, films like The Exorcist and stuff, and probably predating that of. It's always been, vampire films, holy water, and crucifixes, as well as multitude of other things. With werewolves, it's the silver bullet, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, that hasn't got a religious context to it necessarily, but a lot
that's
of the time,
sometimes the case for vampires too. I've seen that in Vampire Legend.
Yeah, it depends, because obviously certain vampire legends, they say about garlic, and then as the years have gone on, probably because in films they feel like it's too complicated to be like, oh, if you've eaten garlic bread, unless it's a comedy, you eat the garlic bread, you can't go near vampires. Normally they're just like that, let's forget about garlic, because we talk about it. It's like the core ones. But do you have an idea of why you think maybe there's been this religion in certain legends and lore, there's been the religiosity sort of intertwined?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's not really so outlandish to want to battle evil if you're really religious. And like, what's the most evil thing that you can think of? Probably fucking Dracula. Like, I mean, I keep saying this, but like, I'm no expert. But I mean, it's like flavor of the week, right? Like, who are we against this week? And Yeah, I mean, vampires and werewolves, I mean, they're like they're almost like mirrors of like the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves too. Like if you think about it, feeding on other people, being a succubus, I mean, that's a very powerful thing, to be able to draw power out of another human being. And then, of course, you have the power of Christ compels you, and that, that holy light to protect you. So, I mean, I feel like it's just this invented kind of, oh yeah, we're going to protect ourselves now with Jesus Christ because Linda Blair is spewing pea soup all over the room, and the only thing that can protect us is, well, potentially a raincoat, but also the power of Jesus Christ. So
it's funny how the culture's moving on, whereas so many more countries and communities are becoming either more agnostic or more atheistic. And because I think the top 3 religions in the world, I think, is Christianity, Islam, and then atheism, due to as a population, I believe it is.
Right.
And it's very interesting. I think Iceland was one of the first countries, and I think there's been maybe a couple of Nordic countries since. I might be wrong on that, but I know there's been a couple of Northern Eastern European and the Nordic countries and things. Some of them are now, primarily when they do the census, number 1 people are atheist. And what's interesting with that is not number 1 people, that's made it sound really weird. The number 1 religious, the way people would identify themselves religiously in the census, the number 1 thing was atheism for a couple of these countries. And what's interesting is where the culture is becoming either more atheist or less of militant religious people. There's so many more moderate Christians I know who just believe in a God, and that's relatively it. And it's, with the culture now, has went from, the power of Christ compels you, to now in a lot of horror films, it's actually a religious cult who are antagonist, which is a really interesting thing. I know there's been previous things like that, but it's really interesting how it's changed, sort of. With that's probably what it was, like, religion, Christianity, you want a good Christian household, and therefore in all our movies the Christians beat evil, and now it's like people understand that there can be toxic religiosity, so now there's a lot more culty films and things about religious cults going mental and executing people. Sure.
And I mean, so if we're talking about, creatures that may or may not exist, in terms of religion, Spring Heel Jack was in existence in the 19th century, I think around like 1837. And he was actually used as a tool to keep people in line. He was, it was a story told to little children to make sure that they went to bed on time. But it was also a tool used by the church to have people come in and pray more and pray harder. I mean, Spring Heel Jack was this creature that could jump the height of a building and spew blue flames out of his mouth, and would knock on people's doors late at night. And, if a young woman opened up the door, he would literally like tear her clothing to shreds with like these giant claws. He was a demon. He was a monster. Well, how do we combat this demonic entity? Well, obviously we have to turn to religion. And I think it's really interesting. Yeah, like you said, the religion has kind of flipped to the other side now of being kind of toxic. And having toxic effect. Like, I think, I watched, what did I watch recently? I forget what it's called. Something about Scientology with Leah Remini?
Oh, maybe? Leah Remini. Yes. She's got a talk show, hasn't she?
Surviving Scientology? Something?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard her talk about it on a podcast. Yeah, she used to be a Scientologist ages ago now, and no longer is one.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a whole series where she goes around, she talks to people who were previously involved in Scientology and have essentially run away from that organization to try to separate themselves from it, and have had negative effects from that, have been attacked and have had negative experiences because of the religious group that they've been affiliated with. That's true of Scientology. That's true of the Jonestown massacre. A lot of people, wanted to get away from Jonestown because Jim Jones was toxic and, whatever. And so we have, new Netflix specials coming out about that. We have new Netflix specials coming out about Waco, and how, that kind of religion is toxic. So, I mean, I feel like not all religion is toxic.
No.
But if you give somebody the power to wield, they can take that anywhere they want. Literally anywhere they want. I mean, I know that there are religions out there that take like 10% of your paycheck, and they take that and they put that into their coffers and whatever. Like, that should be a genuine gift, like something that you want to physically give. Like, I remember the collection plate coming around when I would go to church with my grandmother, and the collection plate came around, and you put a couple of dollars in the collection plate, and it was an at-will, it was a goodwill gesture.
Yeah.
And then there are these other churches and religions that are like, no, we're just going to garnish your wages. Like, what is that? So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that every religion in the world, all religions are toxic, but I mean, they certainly have the power to be. And I think that's the scary part, Yeah. Like, as is the case with any human being. I mean, anyone is capable of doing something terrible to somebody else. Anybody is capable of losing their senses and like harming somebody else and winding up in prison. I always tell people, like, I'm not going to look at people in prison and be like, oh, well, I would never, like, those people are stupid. Like, what are they doing in prison? I would never be so stupid as to do something that would land me in prison. Well, I can't say that. Because I could totally be that person that like loses their shit one day and just, does something stupid and winds up in prison. So, I mean, it's not even really so much like religion or non-religion or, whatever. It's just humanity,
Circumstance. A lot
and
of it
circumstance. Yeah. I mean, it's just the lot that you've been given and the lot that you feel like you should do something with. And whether that's positive or negative, I mean, it's up to the person. We have free will. Whatever created us gave us free will to do that. So yeah, I mean, we're going to do whatever, and, we're just going to have to deal with the repercussions. That's just how it goes.
It is one of those. It's like, I think of like the example of the Westboro Baptist Church, where there's a lot of people who've left it. I think Megan Phelps is one of them, and I've listened to podcasts with her as well, and she's an incredible individual. And she was born in the church, and so like a lot of what they call like intellectual atheists. So I'll call them like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, the sort of ones who have conventions well, not Hitchens anymore, but the famous atheists in a sense, who speak about religion in certain ways. And they've said before, where it's like, it's the idea, I think, that's a lot of the time not necessarily the problem, but it's once someone gets indoctrinated, if someone is, say, in air quotes, not born, but say if someone's born with a screw loose there's a really easy metaphor for it to be like an extreme version. Someone's just a psychopath. They just have zero empathy of any kind at all, and they're just born that way. That person could be a business owner if he had rich, in a air quotes, rich white family, as an example, he could become top of a CEO business. But if he was in, say, an impoverished community and he was a person of color, potentially in a place where it was already had a lot of issues in that realm, that person, the psychopathy would change from saying being business and being cutthroat shark in a business but never killing anyone to if you got into a gang, if you're on the wrong side of things. And it's like, I've had people with myself speak about, circumstance and things, and I'm quite good with numbers. Well, if I was born in, say it was the same mind and same parents, but the circumstances of finances and location were different, if I could have got into drug dealing, or my akin for maths could have helped me, and I could have gone down that path, and I may not be in the job I'm in now. And it's interesting to see, there are, as you say, people in prison, and a lot of it is either circumstances out of their control and they made decisions which did not help themselves, or there are people in prison who had like a moment of rage that is wrong. And I'm not trying to justify a lot of people in there, but like, if I was in town with my girlfriend, said it again, Megan, and if I was not giving her a name, just forget it.
I'm sure she's grateful that she gets a name.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast a few times as well, so it makes it even worse I'm not naming her, because any regular listeners actually know. But still, it's if I was in town, like, I would never want to hit anyone, and I could say I would never kill anyone. But
Right.
as you said, if I was in a situation where someone had a knife on Megan and I saw an opportunity and it was them or Megan, I would probably kill them and then I'd go to prison.
Right.
So that is an extreme example, but that is a really easy, in a sense, black and white way of looking at it. And the more you kind of change the goalposts, the more grey it becomes. And that's when I completely agree with what you've said, is you don't know what people are capable of.
Well, and I mean, not everybody who is in prison is a Carl Ripken, you know? Not everybody who's in prison is a Jeffrey Dahmer.
No.
You know, I mean, those people are few and far between. The majority of people who are in prison for just, I mean, like you said, circumstance, doing what they have to do, essentially to live and feed their families, get by, whatever. Or, you know, they've done something like they've lied on their taxes. And now they have parking tickets that are not paid. They were pulled over and they smelled like marijuana. So now they're in jail for 6 months.
And they're in one of the states that doesn't have marijuana that's legal. But if you go a few miles that way, then it's fine.
Right. Exactly.
It's a very bizarre.
you bought some edibles in Chicago and then you drove to Wisconsin and got pulled over. Well, you just brought drugs over state line. Guess where you're going? Prison. You know, it's just, I mean, there's no way to say, ultimately. Like, if I was in the same position, I went out somewhere with my wife, we were threatened, and I had to do something, I would do it. You know, like, I'm not a violent person. I've never hurt anybody else in my life. But if something were to threaten her or threaten my life, I would have to do something. And yeah, that might land me in some hot water, but that's something that you just have to do because there's crazy people in the world, you know, like.
What side of crazy you wanna sort of be on and things.
Yeah, right.
Being human is so weird. And what I find the weirdest is when people sort of, we spoke about this a little bit last time, is when people almost criticize you for being, or criticize one for being a air quotes weird person, collecting skulls or Star Wars tattoos, or, which is, you know, I think that me having Star Wars tattoos is more weird than collecting skulls, because I think collecting skulls is amazing and cool. But
I have been called a serial killer on more than one occasion because I collect, to me. Taxidermy and skulls and stuff. Yeah.
But that's so cool. If you go to a museum and you see, you know, taxidermy stuff, there's some of the coolest museums I've been in are just filled with just random stuff explorers have gathered over the years.
I mean, I've personally never wandered into the Milwaukee Museum and thought, wow, that curator, that motherfucker is a serial killer. Absolutely. Never even crossed my mind.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I consider my collection to be akin to kind of like a dime store, like a mini dime museum. You know, you pay your dime and then you get to go in and like look at whatever. And like when people come over, like if my friends come over, they want to see my collection.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's a request. Like,
exactly.
Can I go upstairs to your office and see your office? Like, you know, and I mean, I've added some new things. Like I've got some fossilized remains from a whale, baleen whale. I've got a company called Eccles, made wax noses and like ears and parts of the face for like morticians to use. So I have a wax nose in my collection now.
That's cool.
Just a disembodied nose that just hangs out in my office. And then, you know, I mean, I have my taxidermy. I have several different kinds of taxidermy. I have wet specimens. Some of them I've preserved myself. I taught myself how to do that because I think it's interesting to be able to further preserve that life after it's gone so that it can be enjoyed. Yeah, it doesn't make me a serial killer.
No, it doesn't. It's the weird thing is that I've said, I can't remember if I said this to you before, but I've said it on the podcast a couple of times where it's like, people, this is the weirdest thing about it. You don't choose what you like. You can choose what you buy, you can choose what you fill your house with, you can choose what you spend your time doing. But at the end of the day, you know, I like, relatively speaking, everything apart from sport and cars. They're just two things. I like playing sport, but I play football or hockey or basketball, any of those things. I like playing them because it's fun, it's exercise, whatever. But if you said, do you want to sit down and watch 3 hours of it? It's like, if I'm with a couple of people who really want to, yeah, I'll hang out and watch it. But if you're like, would I choose that? No.
Or I mean, like you're down to the pub or something, you're hanging out with friends and the soccer game is on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if that, I don't. That's fine. I'm more than happy to do that. There's
Or sorry, the football game. If the football game.
Yeah, well, soccer, football. Yeah, it's and it's funny with it because even when like the World Cup was on and things, like I don't care about football. But when the World Cup's on, I was getting like, oh, England's doing well. I'm happy for everyone in England who cares about football that they're happy, and I was getting into it because everyone else was, and it's a camaraderie. But I don't actually care about sport at all. It's just not anything that appeals to me. But I don't. At work, I've got a couple of workmates and stuff. We give each other shit because, you know, I'm a massive Star Wars nerd and movies and etc. And they don't see it in the same way. But I go, well, you guys are nerds too. And they're, well, not really. But you can name every footballer over the last like 30 years that have played for like any team. You can literally, I can say a team to you in a year and you'll tell me where in the Premier League they were. You're a nerd. Like, you're just a sports nerd. You know about these games that people like to play and people watch them. I, however, like to watch made-up fantasies about space wizards. They're both equally inconsequential to anything. They don't really, apart from the monetary value to the economy in some argument, apart from that, they don't mean anything. So everything is fair game if you want to like what you like. And I love your eclectic collection. Like if I was ever in Wisconsin, I would just visit you and just come see it all, because that'd be nice. And I'd give you a dime as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, yeah. The price of admission.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's like it ranges from taxidermy and wet specimens and another recent ad was a mummified goat.
Oh, I think I saw that on Facebook or something.
Somebody sent me a mummified goat. Apparently it's a symbol of like good luck.
Okay.
I don't know, but he's cute. His name is Arthur. He has like a little tag around his neck and it says Arthur.
That's so cool.
I think that the other part of my collection, I feel like I talked about this a little bit last time too, is knowing where all the pieces come from. It's almost akin to knowing where you come from. Like there's that much of a comfort in it for me. For example, I can walk into my office right now and pick anything off the shelf and be like, I got this from, this specific place and, the guy who sold it to me. Like, for example, Walter, he's my favorite piece of taxidermy. He's a full mount javelina, peccary pig.
Okay. Yeah. Amazing.
And I got him from Craigslist, and the guy who was selling him gave me like all of the paperwork that goes with him, and he was actually like a B movie prop.
Oh.
So he was used in a really shitty horror movie called Javelina.
Oh, okay.
And you can actually, if you go on YouTube and you type in Javelina movie, you'll get the opportunity to watch Walter run, quote unquote, run alongside a sports utility vehicle for like 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, he has a story. So it's almost like the pieces in my collection are like people. Like it's almost like being interconnected with other people. I think it's the main reason why I gravitate towards like the oddball groups on Facebook. Because I know that if I go in there, nobody's going to be like, oh, well, you're a serial killer. Like, why would you collect, a raccoon skull? That's terrible. Or why would you preserve wet specimens? Like, what are you going to do with that? Like, yeah. So I gravitate towards these groups where people are already kind of like outcasts and like considered weird and, or like I can't talk to my significant other about it because she's disgusted or like she's just not interested in it. I mean, it's one of those things like through my collection, I've managed to build a community of people who have collections themselves. And now it seems like their collections are slowly migrating into my collection. So like they'll post something and they'll be like, I want $20 for this. And I'm like, oh, do I want that? Do I need it? I don't need it, but I do want it. So yeah, I mean, I just got a box of little odds and ends somebody sent to me. It was like a porcupine quill. There was a fox pelvis, cleaned like bone. A couple of little shells, a couple of weird seed pods from like I think there's something called like a bat plant or a bat flower or something, and the seed pod actually looks like a bat.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I mean, people pack stuff up and send stuff to me all the time, and it usually happens right after I put out an issue of the literary journal, which just happened.
It's a Corvus review?
Yeah, yep. So, yeah, I just recently released that, so I'm still getting, like, little trickles of things in the mail just to say thank you for, publishing them or whatever. I really wish they would just donate money. I mean, yeah, that sounds kind of bad, but, like, I kind of wish they would, because then I could pay for web hosting. That would be nice. Because, raccoon skulls don't pay the rent, right?
No, and I don't think there's something that's going to necessarily increase in value unless raccoons suddenly go extinct.
Right. Yeah, random seashells, probably, beach glass, probably not gonna. Yeah. This is not a trade and barter system.
No, it's not. Unless there's like an apocalypse thing, and then instead of like bottle caps being the currency, you have seashells, and that's the currency. You're in it. Seashells and animal skulls.
Or like random stamp collections. Gotten like random stamps in the mail. It's just weird.
I got old keys. If I find like an old key somewhere, not a proper house key, I just like really old. I've got one that it's this big. It's so old that if you put it into a lock and twisted it, it would snap. It's that thin and broken. But it's cool because it's part of that fun, that wonder. Like I've always been like, this could be taken the wrong way, but I don't mean it like that. I'd love to have almost X-ray vision, and walking down the street, I love looking like from the pavement or from the sidewalk. I like looking and seeing if people's houses are open, as in the curtains are undrawn and open. Sure. You can see how they've made their lounge, especially if their house is very similar in structure or things to what your house is or anything like that. And you see them and you just go, all these people who are just born into the world without choice and are just have to live the first, probably 10 to 15 years without really any choice of free will, bar really, really small things like what you want to wear, what you vaguely want to eat. And then you get your own little weird nest place and you just collect weird things and put them in a house and it's yours. And I love when I get in like a new friend or meet someone who I've known for a while who maybe I had to happen to their house or something, and you go in their house. It's like, I can't make a big deal because it looks like I'm going to steal stuff. Like, but so why are you taking so much interest in that coat hanger? It's like, no, it's not. I just think it looks really cool next to that door, next to my back door. But it's just so interesting how people organize things. It's just random stuff. None of it means anything apart from kitchen appliances and maybe you could argue a TV, but everything else is just, like old people and not old people, but rugs and pictures of family on the wall, but also framed movie posters. Like people just, I love it. And I think the thing about history and a lot of the sort of odd things that you collect, which I think are really cool, it's just, as you say, everything has a story. And even if it's just, you look at someone's house, you can tell certain things about them. It's just a nice way to familiarize yourself with a person without actually having to say anything.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, if you walked into my house, you wouldn't, none of my collection is in the main house.
Hidden away.
It's in a room up over a flight of stairs. And I mean, it's there because a lot of the stuff my wife is not keen. She doesn't want wet specimens in the living room. Like, this is not a thing that she wants, that she desires. So the only thing that I am allowed to keep in the main part of the house that might give you a hint as to exactly how weird I am is a taxidermied duck gaff.
What's a gaff?
So gaff taxidermy is essentially when you attach things to a piece of taxidermy that normally wouldn't be there. For example, a jackalope is a gaff. Okay. Because there's no such thing as a jackalope. It's a rabbit and an antelope. Smushed together.
I see what you mean.
The duck that I have is in a little glass case, a little cloche. Kind of, I mean, it's only small. It's like less than 18 inches.
Okay.
And it's kind of tucked into one side of this shelf that when you walk in through the door, the shelf is there. But you really have to look to see the two-headed duck.
Amazing.
So he's just kind of he's tucked in there. And his name is Frankenduck.
Amazing.
One of them is Frank and the other one is Duck. So they each have a name.
Frankenduck.
Frankenduck, yeah.
Genius.
But yeah, I mean, that's the only real thing that would give you a clue. My wife is also really into like fantasy and like myths and legends and stuff, but like Arthurian legends.
Oh, no, it's the round table, that sort of jazz.
Yeah, she's
Dragons,
big into
etc.
that. So like we have a helmet, like a Crusaders helmet that I bought for her for Christmas one year. That's in the entryway. If you look on the walls, there's an artist in Newfoundland. I forget what his name is, but like 6 years ago when we were back home visiting family in Newfoundland, we got to go to his studio and take a little tour. And he does kind of like storytelling, fantasy kind of artwork. So we have one that's a mermaid. We have another one that is like a long ship.
Okay.
Getting tossed in the ocean. And then there's another one of a tiny ship getting tossed in the ocean, and underneath it is a huge kraken.
Oh,
like,
amazing.
Coming up through. So, I mean, there's little hints, but you won't really know the extent of the shit that you've gotten into until you go up over the stairs and open the office door. That's when you're like, whoa, okay.
There's hints all around the house, or little Easter eggs, and then you find...
Bit. Yeah,
you find the Alice in Wonderland door and you open up and it's all the craziness.
Well, you know, I kind of want to take that door to my office off and put on one of those like bookshelf doors.
Oh, amazing.
Because we never have enough space for books because my wife's an avid reader. So if I got a bookshelf door, then that means that I could put books on the bookshelf door. And then I could open the bookshelf door and go into like my secret office, which I think would be really cool. But
would you try and have it where you have like a specific book and you pull that out and that is the special lever, or would you have it just like a more simple one?
Oh, I think they're designed so that like there's a section, like a little section that you reach into, and there's a little knob.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not even thinking something that in depth. You're like.
I want
way
to go
above my head on it.
Yeah, next stage is going to be you get your own castle, right? And then you press the bricks in a certain way, and the whole, you know, like
the wall opens, and it's like yeah.
That's exactly it. That's what it's easy to do. God, that wouldn't be horrendously expensive and unnecessary.
Yeah.
How many Bracken skulls could you buy with that? That kind of money.
God.
Oh, man. I was going to say, if you've got still time, if there's not, I'm not keeping you up or anything, if you've got another 15, 20 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, wonderful. I was going to ask you about, there's a theory that I heard about, which is Terence McKenna's theory, actually. And he's a famous psychonaut and things, which is basically avid drug taker. And he spoke about this theory, and it combines with a lot of other things that I was speaking with Megan about earlier, actually. And it's about 200,000 years ago or so. There was the Homo species, which was like more ape-like. Basically, their brain size doubled in the sense of the amount of percentage body weight it was taking up doubled. And so our brains are disproportionately larger compared to our bodies than a lot of other mammals and things. And it happened really, really quickly in an unusual way. And there's a lot of interesting theories as to how that happened. And one of them is the stoned ape theory, which is that in cow pats, or cow dung, psilocybin mushrooms grew, so magic mushrooms, and they wouldn't be monkeys, you know, be the ancestor that we share the same as other primates, you know, maybe the missing link, you know, but Homo, whatever it was, they ate these psilocybin mushrooms, and the idea is that it stimulated certain parts of their brain, and over years and years and years, eventually it made it grow in a certain way and made them understand lots of other things, like develop the language center in the brain, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Now that's a really cool, interesting theory in itself. But then what I like to do is combine it with all the other cool theories at that time of what caused the human brain to double in size. So there's like, you could have that, but then there's also eating meat around that time. So it's maybe, and then there's also hunting as well. Okay. So there's the hunting part, which is spears in the Stone Age, you know, that a lot of monkeys and things, primates and things, they use stones to break open stuff. They make spears to go fishing, etc.
Right.
Well, there's the throwing arm of throwing a javelin or a spear. The actual amount of processing power that takes to figure out, you know, is it raining? Is there wind? If you throw it, how much force you have to do to get it to hit what you're doing, the force of it, etc. That mixed with the psilocybin mushrooms, allegedly, mixed with, because they were hunting and things, they were eating meat, which then meat has a certain amount of nutrients in that's much harder to get in, you know, with a purely vegetarian diet. And obviously nowadays you can cultivate that sort of thing, but back then when you're primates, you can't really. So a lot of these little things put together, which could have been the cause of the human brain sort of doubling in size. And another one of those theories is, I briefly touched upon it earlier, which is aliens, as some people say. Aliens came down and mated with primates. Yeah, that's it. That aliens. Meme with the guy with the big hair.
With the crazy hair, yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of those theories. And normally when I'm pretty intoxicated around festivals, around a fire, that's normally the time the sort of conversations come out. But it's so fun to think of all these crazy theories as to why the human brain doubled in size. There's probably hundreds of micro reasons that all just happen to culminate into one reason, and that's why. But it's so fun. Like, you could just sit around for hours and say, oh yeah, this thing caused that. And I think my love of it's almost scientific theory, but it's like with Gandalf's pipe and just kind of thinking about it. It's that kind of silliness, and I love that, and I've always loved history, and that's why I think, especially in parts of my life, I've noticed I've got into mythology as well, which obviously you mentioned your partners into in certain ways, but I like, the Greek mythology, but there's also Roman mythology and all the different gods, and obviously that goes into religion,
right?
And it's just storytelling, isn't it? It's just all stories, and that's one of the weird things about humans, is that it doesn't really matter what you're into. Even sports, in a lot of ways, is the story of it happening, because unless you're playing the sport, you're watching something. What is it other than a story?
Right.
And it's so weird to think about that humans are so into stories, I'd say, in so many different facets, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, any information that you want to relay to another human being, how do you do it? You tell them a story. I mean, that's the way that we relate to one another. It's not like, hey, Jim, how are you? I'm fine. And then 25 minutes of silence until Jim goes home. Like, no. We want to know about Jim's family and that vacation that he took with his wife and his 2 kids, and, how his dog is doing and what happened to his dog. And, and so we have to weave all of these complex narratives to kind of keep the other person engaged. I mean, if you would ask me at the top of the show, what's going on? And I'd be like, nothing. And then we just fucking sat here. Like, I mean, it just wouldn't work,
No.
And as human beings, we're narrative creatures. We want to craft narratives so that the world around us makes sense. And I think that you can say that about a lot of things. I think that you can say that about, I feel like I've been on like the religion bashing train for this episode. But I've always firmly believed that, the Bible, the stories of the Bible were crafted as something generic that people could use to form their lives and their existence, and how they functioned within the society that they existed in at that time. Yeah. I don't think it translates real well to today unless you finagle it a little bit, and some people are better with the finagle than others, obviously. But, it's just one of those things. We tell stories so that our world makes sense. And through the telling of these stories, we somehow get that feedback that says, okay, my life kind of makes more sense, or I make more sense to myself now because I had that reaction to that. Like, for example, like I said, I come from a, military police family background. A lot of my family members are either law enforcement or military. And, this whole thing with, the unrest, the Black Lives Matter movement and the police, and, the abuse of power and all of this stuff. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's like, what is my narrative, and like, what story do I want to leave behind, and what story do I want to precede me? Like, do I want to be the person, that lady in Central Park who called the police on the bird watcher? Like, do I want to be on that side of history, or do I want to be the person who's like, this is bullshit. There's no reason why this should be happening to people, to human beings. And it needs to stop, and that to me clearly seems like the right side of history. But to other people, Maybe that's not the way their narrative works. Maybe they want to be the bird watcher in Central Park, calling the police on a man who was clearly bird watching. Like, he had everything to go bird watching. And he called you out because you didn't have your dog on a leash. Like, that is bullshit. What are you doing? You know? I mean, if there ever was a Karen, that is a Karen. Yeah, it's just craziness. But yeah, I mean, we tell stories to make sense of the world that we're living in. I'm sure that 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will tell stories to our children trying to make sense of what COVID-19 was and what the Black Lives Matter movement was, and, you know, what we did to make our world a better place, no matter what perspective that's from. We're still going to tell those stories, and we're still going to share those narratives, because what else do we have? You know, when you think about it, we're just human beings on this giant rock floating through space, and we're just trying to make sense of it all. And maybe we never will, but maybe that's okay. You know? Yeah.
That's one thing that I had to come to terms with in my sort of late teens, where I was like, when it became clear to me, I kind of had like an epiphany, and I was like, oh, I'm never going to know everything. In fact, right. I'm never even going to know even remotely close, like not even, like, you think, oh, maybe I'll know 1% of everything. And then you go, okay, that's a bit dumb. Maybe 0.1%. And now I'm like, I don't think the amount of knowledge I have about anything is not even, 100 decimal places. I know fucking nothing. Like,
right.
We all just have like a tiny, incrementally tiny piece of the puzzle. That's all we have. Or like, we have the world's smallest torch or flashlight, and we're like the size of ants on planet Earth, and we've all got a tiny little light source, and we're all like, no, I know how this all works. I know exactly. I've got it. God doesn't like the gays. That's the problem here. It's like, well, It's probably not. Like, well, it's like, obviously the religion bashing thing. You and I think are both in the same boat, where it's like, don't hate religious people, because that's not fair. You just hate people who are assholes, and some of them are religious. It's
right.
Not...
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the other part of it, right? Like, not all assholes are religious. Some people are just assholes.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter.
That's just, I mean, and it's because of how you were raised. It's because of the circle of friends that you keep. If those people are inclined to believe what you believe, and you only surround yourselves with those people, then, I mean, that's where you're going. Like, that's what you're going to understand. That's your pen light that you're shining out into the world, you know. But then I think with the recent things that are going on in the world, you also have to consider that is your legacy. Like, that is what you're leaving behind. So when you post something shitty on Facebook and you say, oh, well, you know, it's absolutely right that police should have just complete power to be able to do whatever because the world is insane, and, you know, whatever. Or you post something like, not all cops. Okay, I mean, that's fine. Not all cops, not all people are bad. Not all lesbians are bad. Not all, you know, I mean, like, you can't really make that generalization. But at the same time, if I knew that somebody in my circle of friends was bad and doing something wrong, I would probably call that person out on it and be like, dude, you can't do that anymore. That's not right. You can't treat people like that. You can't say that. And I think that's a lot of the problem. Like, it's just been let go for so long. You know, people have just accepted that this is the way that the world is. And I think if we're not careful, this is the way the world ends. You know, like, what is that quote? Like, not with a bang, but with a whimper?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, do we really want to be the stupid whimpering masses, or do we really want to take charge of what's going on in the world right now and be like, this is bullshit, we need to change it? Yeah. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I'm not the person out there marching with people. Physically, I'm not able to do that. But I am the person who, like, if I hear people passing by my house in protest, I will go out there and support them. I mean, I'm not going to be that person that's going to come down on the wrong side of history. Yeah. And actually, I mean, it's something that I've really been struggling with because of the fact that my family is so aligned with these essentially like power controlling entities that, I mean, you know, I know my cousin works up in, she works on the mainland. I feel like it's maybe Saskatchewan. But she's a police officer. And I mean, I know my cousin and I love my cousin, and I can't see her ever doing something like what was done to George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
I could never, ever in a million years imagine her doing something like that. And then I come back to that conversation that we had about what would you do if you felt threatened?
Mm.
And then I come back to the idea that the police in America are so militarized. And why do we need two militaries? We don't. You know, like, we have a military and we need a police force. But we don't need the police force as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need people in riot gear shooting rubber bullets at people in the face when clearly rubber bullets are supposed to be fired at the ground. I'm not a police officer and I know this. So for me to know this and police officers to not know that, that's a little scary.
It was the whole situation that's happening over in primarily America, because obviously over here we had Black Lives Matter protests and chants and things, and that's all great and things, and I obviously fully support all that sort of thing. It should almost be a given. Like, well, it's I hear it and I go, well, obviously, but it's not actually that obvious, because there's a lot of people who don't believe that. So it does baffle me. Same as when I found out about, you know, gay marriage in America being legalized and there being actual protests. I was like, I forgot. I forgot people actually for some reason care.
It was only a few years ago that I was worried if my wife had to go into the hospital, that I would not be allowed to go into the hospital with her because I was not related to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were married, but they were going to tell us that no, I would have to wait in the waiting room. And she would have to go in back. I mean, it was just, it's insanity. And that was only a few years ago. It was very recent.
One of the most baffling things to me is in England, being gay was illegal until the 70s.
You're right.
It was. I think it was 67 or something similar to that. And it was like, I remember when I first heard that fact from, it was actually a gentleman I had on the podcast, a friend of mine he's gay. And I think I looked it up before speaking with him because he mentioned it before our chat and things. And I was like, oh, wait, being gay, I know there's been like a lot of stuff in history which has been very anti-homosexual, but I didn't realize it was actually illegal. And then that's where the Polari, the rhyming slang came from in the gay community, because it was, if a man sat on a bench by himself, you sat down next to him, you said a couple of words in Polari. If he said words back in Polari, you knew you were both gay and you could do with that what you want. Or if he said, what are you saying? You're like, okay, can't. And it's like, obviously, once again, it's the thing of privileges. I'm in that place where I'm like, I couldn't even fathom why that was ever a thing. Who decided being gay to be illegal? I'm like, the baffling thing about that, in the most part, is very similar in the way of sort of Black Lives Matter racism. It's like, I can't fathom it, because it's like, you can't choose who you're attracted to, and you also can't choose your skin color. So how could you ever treat someone differently for them being unable to choose? It's like, and it's with religious fundamentalists, once again, not against religion, but people who are very hardlined in the Bible and things. And it's like, oh no, being gay is a choice. It's like, what? So you could, so if it was like to a pastor or something, you're like, oh, so you could choose to like penis. Like I like, in all honesty, if I was single, I would, if I could choose, I would be bisexual, in the sense of where we're at the point now where it's a palette. It's an area of sex where I'm never going to experience, hopefully, because I'm not into that. It's just penises revolt me, and that I don't.
I mean,
that.
present company excluded, I'm sure.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, I don't know, mine's pretty grim. But it's one of those. It's so baffling to me. And then with the Black Lives Matter thing, it's the same. And it's like, how... Yeah. There's so many other things we can argue about. There's so many things wrong with this world that we could really have a serious conversation about. And there's so many people arguing about hashtag Black Lives Matter and hashtag All Lives Matter. And it's God. It's like, how are people still on this? This is like page 1. This was like years ago, and it's come back of the whole... I mean, I'm referring to people saying All Lives Matter. It's like, it is so simple. If your mate has tripped over and hurt themselves, and they go, can you help me, mate? You don't go, oh yeah, but you're not hurt. You're hurt, but I need help. I'm also, but you're not on the floor in pain right now. If you fall over in a bit and something goes wrong, we'll help you up. But
Right.
at the moment, this is what you need to focus on.
Turnabout is fair play. Like,
Yeah. It's just... Oh, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Going down rabbit holes of that sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's
my
frustrating.
my favorite explanation of All Lives Matter is you wouldn't go to a funeral where, you know, somebody has just died and one of their loved ones is up giving the eulogy and stand up and be like, actually, all lives matter. No, you wouldn't. Because that would be idiotic, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh God. Yeah.
The world is a crazy and confusing.
You know, I mean, like,
place.
you know, I struggled with, because I'm a podcaster. I don't have a huge platform. I don't have a huge following, but I still want to make sure, like I keep saying, I want to come down on the right side of history.
Yeah.
And so I really struggled with the intro for the first episode that's going to be released on Monday, because I don't want to come off as, oh yeah, you know, here's this white lady, you know, saying that she understands, you know, what's going on. Because I don't. And I never will, because I'm not of color. I'm not a person of color. I am an other. I do fall into the other category. I'm disabled a little bit. You know, I'm a lesbian. I'm a woman, which glass ceiling is still a thing. So, I mean, I understand all of these things, but I will never understand what it's like to be discriminated against because of the color of my skin, because I have that privilege of being white. And I just think it's so asinine that I'm privileged because of my skin color. It's just so asinine. Why can't we just all be humans? You know, it makes no sense to me at all. I mean, you know, coming from a place where there aren't really black people. Like when I was growing up, I didn't know any black people. I knew some Asian people. The majority of like the doctors, and it's very strange. In Newfoundland, it's almost like there's like little niches where people are. So like there's like the bad part of town, but that's all white people.
Okay.
So it's like low income housing, but they consider it to be the bad part of town.
Right.
Then you have like, you know, Chinese food restaurants, they have, you know, like sushi restaurants and stuff like that. But like laundromats or whatever, what do they call that? Fucking, why am I blanking? I feel like I'm 100 years old right now. I'm like, can't remember shit.
What term?
Dry cleaning places.
That. Okay.
So, the Asian community seems to operate there. And then you have like doctors, lawyers who are all East Indian, which is very strange. And so, I mean, like when I was growing up, that was the way I thought about people.
Yeah.
Just everybody being in their own little niches, because I didn't go to school with people who were Hmong.
No, of course,
because that wasn't a thing. They lived in a different part of town. So I went to school in the white part of town that I didn't know was the white part of town, because I had this privilege that I could just be like, yeah, I'm just going to go to school. And then at the same time, in another part of town, you know, and somewhere else in the country, there's somebody walking to school who gets shot because they're on somebody's lawn and they just happen to be black. You know, everything is, it's so fucked up. It's so fucked up.
It is. And it's one of those things where I've said it in the podcast before, and it's one of those things where I'm kind of ashamed of it in some ways, but it's like, I didn't even know racism was a thing until I saw an episode of That's So Raven. I was 8 or 9 years old. And there's an episode of That's So Raven on the Disney Channel where Raven doesn't get a job, but her friend who's white, Chelsea, does get a job, and then the owner says, oh, she doesn't hire black people. And I remember I was at 8 or 9 when I saw that, and I was like, wait, what? Because in the school I went to, I'm from Southampton in England, which is right down south, and England is kind of the stereotypical flip of America. So the up north is stereotypically considered more backwards. It's not, just to clarify to people, but, you know, there generally is a higher percentage of seemingly racism up north, and down south is generally more liberal-ish. You know, And Southampton is dockyards, it's docks and things. We had the Titanic come here before it went. I think then went to Plymouth and sailed off, or it went to us after Plymouth. But we had some sort of we touched the boat when it was here, and we got a museum about it. Cool,
right?
But because of the docks is multicultural and stuff, we've got a higher population of people from Poland, as well as there's also people of Indian descent and lots of Asian descent as well. And we've got 2 universities, so it attracts a wide berth of people. And so in my primary school, which is, will be for you guys, when I was like 5 to 10, that was when it was a Catholic school as well. There were people of all kinds of different races there. So it was normal to me. It was just, people of different races. And then I was like, oh, we all treat each other like people. Right. And I saw that episode of That's So Raven and it changed. And I was like, I remember that being one of the first moments where, kind of reality hits you and you lose a little bit of your childish innocence. And it was that because obviously it's from a place of privilege. I'm a very privileged individual. I'm a, white millennial male in England in 2020. Like, you don't really get much higher up apart from trust funds, I'd say.
Ticking all the boxes there.
Yeah. And so I often feel guilty. And I like to say that thing in the podcast about how that's the moment I realized about racism, of just how naive I was at a young age, but because I feel like with this, having a platform, even though I don't have millions of listeners, that'd be nice. I always am in two minds of things when it comes to speaking about things like Black Lives Matter or social movements, when it comes to people of colour and things, because England has a slightly different political view on race than America does. America is more about black and white, but also about immigrants who are Mexican. That's the general stereotypes. Whereas over here, it's more about immigrants that are either Polish or Muslim for some reason. They're the two. It's very bizarre how it works, especially because we're an island and, all of our ancestors are immigrants, but still same as America in most ways. Right. It's really weird. Right. But I always feel odd when I speak about things like Black Lives Matter, because I never want people to think I'm going, this is right, this is the way, and I know because I don't. I'm just saying my opinion, but it's like, I hope that people hear the sincerity, and I'm like, I just try and let people say their opinions on the show and stuff, but I generally have people I agree with for the most part. But it's like, I always feel like I don't want anyone to hear the show and be like, oh, he's talking like he knows from experience. Like, I really don't. Like, I want to put my hands on God. I from this sort of thing, I do feel do you know what I mean? Like, it's this weird thing to explain. It was like, not quite white guilt, because I don't feel guilty about doing anything. But, it's, I don't want to say I know what it's like in their shoes, because especially from where I am, like, I'm straight and things, so it's even less on that part. I always feel guilty in a sense talking about some of these issues, acting like I know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm coming from? I'm kind of rambling on. I said the same thing 3 times.
Yeah, this concept of white guilt. I read something recently about a girl who it was on Facebook. She'd marched with her whole family, person of color, in the Black Lives Matter marches in Milwaukee. And she said that she kept marching past white people who were crying. And she's like, what right do they have to stand there and visibly show their sadness when, like, we're being murdered? It just, and so I always think about that. I'm like, this concept of white guilt. Like, I'll be the first to admit, when I see people marching for a good cause, I do get very emotional, because I feel like I support them and I'm on the right side of history. I feel like they're good people trying to do the right thing, and that's who I want to ally myself with. But at the same time, when I start to feel like I'm going to get emotional about it because I am experiencing this, I have to leave. Because I feel like it's not my right to make it about me. And I think that that's the whole, this whole concept of white guilt. Like, well, if I'm guilty about it, then that's making it about me. And it doesn't really matter so much that I'm guilty about it. It matters more what I do now to in my thoughts and my actions, the way that I operate every day, the way that I treat people. That's what matters. And what happened. We can't go back in time and fix slavery. We can't keep that from happening. People who have ancestors who were slave traders, you can't go back in time and change your name. You can't do it. that was shit that happened. You know, I mean, they sold people like cattle, and it's abhorrent, and there's no need for that. But you can't just be like, well, I'm really, you know, and I'm not shitting on you either.
No, of course, no.
This is just my own personal perspective, but like
100%.
I feel like I can't personally be like, yeah, I'm really guilty about it, and then just be with that, you know? Like, I feel like I have to, like, this is the reason why I feel guilty about it, but I'm gonna keep it kind of to myself and like low key, because I don't want to be that person who takes away from what you're doing.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and that's what I mean. Is that's why, in part as well, where I was like, making about me. Like, if I'm, instead of me talking about these issues, it's like, well, does anyone really want to hear my opinion on these issues? But It's like, on the other side, it is like, but if I'm saying my opinion on this, maybe someone hears what I have to say, and then they look into it more and go elsewhere and become more informed in it. And it's like,
well, and then you're the one with the privilege.
Yeah.
Right? So then you feel like, well, I should say something, I should do something, I should be in these marches, I should be visible because I am white. And because there are other people besides me who are being treated badly, I should use my whiteness as a tool to raise awareness and to bring other people, like you said, to awareness, to let them know what's going on. I mean, I think that that's profoundly important. I just really, I really don't want to come off as that person who's like, and now it's about me. Like,
that's the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Like, you don't want to be that person who's so outspoken that you take away from what other people are experiencing. Because,
and it's the
like I said
sickening.
before, I mean, even though, you know, I am an other, I will never know what it is to be that other.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. So that's kind of where I am on it.
Yeah, and the same as virtue signaling is a kind of like rounding off finishing points and things. It's just, I also don't want to come across like I'm being some sort of, look at me, look how valiant I am. I support Black Lives Matter, and therefore I am amazing. Moral compass is aligned. I'm not saying white people who support Black Lives Matter are doing that. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying I also worry about coming across like I'm only doing it to be, I'm like, look at me, look at me because I'm doing the right thing, therefore I'm good. Right. And obviously, that's once again, that's not attacking you or anyone else. It's that weird tightrope in my own mind where I'm overthinking to such a unnecessarily ridiculous degree that the only point should really be is just be nice to people generally and be good. Like, one of the reasons I want to have kids one day is because I would like to be able to raise someone and let them have an awesome life. And if they have friends who, maybe if they've got parents who aren't as awesome, they can come over our house and chill with, like, my parents I was fortunate that my parents let all my friends come over my house all the time. And some of them who had not as good home lives or things or whatever, they come over and just hang out. And it's not a big deal. And it's those sort of things where, like, if you could just bring a little bit of good in the world, either via podcast or just raising a good kid or doing community projects or protesting or any of these things, if everyone just generally did that, it would be such a better place. And that's, I guess, what everyone just has to kind of aim for, really.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. I think that, you know, the protesting and making sure that the people who are doing wrong are punished for what they do. I think that that's a good step in the right direction. I still think it's a small step, but I mean, any step is better than no step. Yes. So, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think that's probably, I won't go on to another subject now because we'll end up talking all night. Even though we had more notes, we'll save for another time. But it's been absolutely amazing having you on and chatting with you, Janine. I feel like I could have probably chat for all night, but probably have to leave this room because I am sweating. I'm so warm in here.
I mean, you're gross. Sweating. I'm in a closet, dude. There's no air conditioning in this closet.
We don't have air conditioning in this whole building.
Oh, seriously?
It's England. We do England, unless you're in a supermarket or in a big office, you do not have aircon. We have windows and fans.
You should get one of those portable jobbies. Those are awesome.
We've got a little fan that's like it's about 3-4 foot high, and it oscillates. And we only get about maybe a month, maybe 2 months of summer, if that.
Oh, sure.
And we've had a couple of weeks of summer, and now we're in the kind of muggy middle, and then we're going to have a few more weeks in a bit, and then that'll be the end of it. So most English people don't have aircon because it just costs quite a lot of money for something that we don't need it for. So because we get overcast, right?
Yeah, we got a portable one that you can plug in, and it has like the adapter for the window, with a hose that goes out.
Yes.
And it's just, it's literally like a compressor on wheels. And it just blows the most beautiful cold air that you could ever imagine. It was like $200.
That's amazing.
It's an investment. It's a good investment.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm somehow losing my voice, which has never happened on a podcast before, ever. So you win a prize there for that. Or maybe I lose a prize for talking far too much and not letting the listeners listen to your amazing stories. But it's been great having you on, Janine. I'll put details in the description and things, but if you just want to say where people can find you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if you want to look at my blog, I put the show notes up there every week for the Identity Podcast. It's theidentitypodcast.wordpress.com. If you want to find me on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at IdentityPod. I'm also on Facebook as the Identity Podcast. And if you have like weird, crazy, ridiculous stories, or you have like a topic you want me to cover, you can send all that to theidentitypodcast@gmail.com.
That's wonderful. And I'll be sure to include all the links in the below description and stuff.
Awesome.
So yeah, once again, Janine, absolutely still having you on, and definitely have to do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad that you're well, and I hope that you stay well. And I hope that all of your listeners stay well and wear a fucking face mask.
Yeah, I showed you my face mask earlier, so I've got little owls on it, so I'm all good.
All right. Awesome.
And that was the end of a very long podcast. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Anyone who made it to the end of my podcast just means that you gave it your all, and I really, really appreciate that. If you do want to hear more of me, go to Genuine Chit-Chat on any of your podcast players or YouTube or wherever, or find me on social media and you can go there. Feel free to contact me in any way, shape or form to ask any questions about the show or anything like that. And yeah, we'll get a conversation going. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for giving the show a chance, guys. Big shout out to Moxie of Your Brain on Facts, who is the person who orchestrated this amazing podcast, Switcheroo. And yeah, hopefully you guys will be hearing from me again if you like the show so much. But if not, I just appreciate you listening anyway. Thank you as always, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll talk to you in the future.